Hello. Today we will be discussing the effects of climate change on cardiovascular disease. To begin with, what is cardiovascular disease? The cardiovascular disease actually refers to a variety of disorders which affect the heart. In addition, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in the US. We'll be focusing on a specific strain of cardiovascular disease known as atherosclerosis. Atherosclerosis is amongst the most common forms of heart disease. It is known to cause blood clots and heart attacks, which can be fatal. So, what even causes this disease in the first place? There has been a link observed between unhealthy habits such as smoking or an unhealthy diet, which can influence a person's cardiovascular health, as well as genetic factors. Now, one might ask what this has to do with the climate. While climate change is not the direct cause of cardiovascular disease, it can be responsible for worsening its symptoms. The rising temperatures that result from climate change, for example, can increase the chances of fatal blood clotting in a person with CVD. Hotter temperatures increase skin blood flow, which in turn leave an individual at a higher risk of experiencing clotting. To make things worse, those living in poverty are at higher risk because lack of access to clean water can result in higher rates of dehydration, which is what causes the increased skin blood flow.
So there was a specific case study that was done in Mashhad, Iran, where the role of temperature in cardiovascular disease mortality was investigated. And researchers found that there is a strong positive association between maximum temperature and mortality, and the results obtained from the study show increased temperatures in the next decades in Mashhad, and a 1 degree Celsius increase in maximum temperature is associated with a 4.27% increase in cardiovascular disease mortality. And if you click on the following slide, you can see how mortality and temperature correlates with each other.
In addition, air pollution, which goes hand in hand with climate change, has negative effects on the heart as well. Research shows that the presence of PM 2.5, which is fine particulate matter, uh, has shown to increase the risk of cardiovascular related attacks. Inhalation of these particles through the respiratory system are responsible for these increased risks, and PM 2.5 levels are raised by human activity.
Now, this specific case on study on air pollution consists of multiple experimental studies where researchers found that the existence of effects of the different pollutants on cardiac attack activity from exposure during both short-term and long-term is evident. Essentially, the lower levels of air pollution in a city, the better cardiovascular and pulmonary health of its population. Globally, the primary cause of death in CV disease, taking an estimated 17.9 million lives annually. More than 90% of the world population has been exposed to air quality levels that do not adhere to the World Health Organization's guidelines on acceptable levels of air pollutants. As a result, the risks of heart disease and other health problems have increased significantly.
Now that we've looked at some specific case studies, let's take a step back and look at the big picture. Remember how one of our case studies looked at rising temperature and its effects on CVD? Well, the figure here from the IPCC Synthesis Report 2023 shows how rising temperatures will affect different regions of the world. Specifically, it shows how many days of the year for which heat and humidity could be potentially life-threatening, two major factors for CVD. As you can see from the rightmost panel, with 4 to 5 degrees Celsius of warming, we have some regions in purple, which mean that heat and humidity are potentially life-threatening for nearly all of the year. These would severely exacerbate cases of CVD. It's also worth noting that a lot of these regions with purple and high-risk regions are in poorer regions as well. And poverty was also one of the risk factors for CVD. So it's very much a double whammy that will exacerbate CVD for a lot of people in a lot of ways. So what can we do about it? Well, some areas that we should focus on are food, water, infrastructure, social protection, and universal healthcare. In particular, Section 4.5.5 of the 2023 IPCC Synthesis Report gave an overview of the effects of climate change on human health and nutrition, and they concluded that policies such as universal healthcare is an effective way to make our health outcomes more resilient to the effects of climate change. Having good food, water, infrastructure, all of these things are really important for mitigating CVD because, as we said before, poverty and lack of access to stuff like clean water and adequate treatment will make CVD cases worse. Even though these aren't direct effects, if it's difficult to stop climate change entirely, at least we can improve these factors to help mitigate the effects of climate change on CVD. These are our references. This is the first page, and this is the second page.